As we're getting settled in, I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Dr. Robbie Fletcher. Of course, I am Commissioner of Education. Been looking forward to these town halls to talk to people face to face for a long time. We have been working on, of course, an accountability system that we feel is going to take us to the next level. So we're very excited to talk to people about this accountability model. And I'll give you a little bit of history as we go through. There's a little bit of background about me. Some of you may not know, this is my 7th month as a commissioner. 7th month. So I don't know where time has flown, but it has been great. It's been fun. It's been jam-packed. The opportunity to talk to legislators on behalf of students is phenomenal. I love that part of the job. I'm not saying we always agree, but yeah, it is a great part to advocate for our kids. And also, too, we have a lot of people in the legislature that are also advocating for our kids, too. So again, it's a great opportunity to do that. But the favorite part of my job is actually visit in schools. And I get to see so much vibrant learning. Well, you'll hear the phrase vibrant learning. We'll have a district here tonight. We'll be talking about vibrant learning with us as we go through. So very excited about that. So again, as Commissioner of Education, I do have to start everyone. I'll try to keep from touching this. I get to get us started and give us a little bit of a background. So there's been a driving moonshot, if you will. And what we're looking for is, in order to build a prosperous Kentucky, we will launch an accountability system that is both meaningful and useful to all learners. That's our goal. Now, I'm here to argue, I will say argue, I'm here to present, there's, in my opinion, and the opinion of so many that I've worked with, so many that are on our team, the only way that we can really and truly have an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all learners is to have a local accountability portion of an accountability system. And we'll talk a little bit more about what local accountability looks like. There's so much great work going on across our community, across our Commonwealth, as a matter of fact, that's going on. As a matter of fact, you can look at, there's so many districts across our state are doing things like defenses of learning. And some of those, if you've ever had the opportunity, we've seen a defense of learning and seen a child stand up and say, this is what I've learned and why I've learned it. And this is why it's relevant to me. We also have, of course, across our Commonwealth, so many people are having the opportunity to be, students are having the opportunity to be interns, apprentices. That's vibrant learning. We'll talk a lot more about vibrant learning, but when you hear that phrase, I hope the very first thing that comes to mind is what is relevant to the student. Again, we believe that we have to have a strong foundation in reading. We're not going to shy away from that. As a matter of fact, there's been such a huge investment by our legislature in numeracy and literacy, and our students deserve a return on investment. Our legislators, we deserve a return on investment. So there's a large part of this accountability model that deals with that federal requirement, but also too having that flexibility to say, what do you want from us as a local community? What do you expect from your local school system? And how can we present that data back to you? The driving force that you're going to see throughout a lot of these conversations, the ideas, 3 pillars, if you will. And the very first pillar, the very first conversation revolves around vibrant learning. In one word, I would describe vibrant learning as relevant. What's relevant to the child? I think many of us can argue one of our best defenses, one of our best tools against chronic absenteeism is having learning that is relevant for the child. How many times in this room, how many times did you get up and go to school because of this one class that you had that was doing something that was different than all the other classes? How many times as a student did you get up and say, you know, I can't wait to be in this class because we're going to have a debate today. We're going to go through some things that more than just take a paper test or a worksheet. Also have time. So I do want to give you kind of a quick background where we've been. We've been in if you look at this has been in the works since 2021. A lot of the foundations was laid back with a listening tour in 2021, the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education and the local laboratories of learning. There's 18 districts that are part of these L3s that have been working on either local accountability systems, vibrant learning, portraits of a learner, other type of vibrant learning experiences, and they've turned these into a local accountability model. 2023, You look at the Kentucky United Learn Council with a specific focus on accountability. And then in 2024, we really ramped this up, if you will. We have gone through and put out 4 different prototypes at different times throughout the past year or less. And every time that we get feedback from people, there's another prototype. We want to listen to you to say, what do you expect from your state accountability system? What do you want us to have? What do you expect from us? So that we can really, truly reflect what our students are learning, not just a test score. Although reading and math are important. Don't let me say anything other than that. But also, too, we put out, now we're at the point of having frameworks. We have 2 model frameworks. The first one we put out, we got input, and now you're going to see a second model framework, which is where we are now. And more than likely, when all these town halls are finished, you'll see another framework that'll come out that we'll talk more with the legislators about. And also, too, please know that legislators have had input, too. We've had them on the 2025 town halls model. In 2026, we hope to have a recommendation to the General Assembly. There are 2 parts. What you're going to see with our local accountability model, a federal piece, which I talked about. We want to streamline the federal bill accountability requirements to those parts to fill the required buckets. And again, we'll talk more about that in a little bit too. But we also want the opportunity to identify the comprehensive, the CSI, TSI, ATSI schools so that we can provide support. I was a part of 2 different schools that were labeled as CSI. We were blessed to work out of those from a great working team that I had. We moved out of that. I understand what that red letter looks like to be a CSI, TSI school. But what we're trying to say is we want to look at this more along the lines of how do we help you to help meet the needs of students. But still, yet you have to have a federal piece to identify those CSI, TSI, and ATSI schools. But we also are looking at a way, how do we provide, you should not have to wait to November to get some data, okay? So one of the things that you're seeing with the interim assessments that we're talking about is how do we get real-time data for teachers so that they can make changes in instruction tomorrow? And again, that interim assessment really is a part of the local accountability piece that feeds into a summative assessment. From the local accountability side, we want to allow flexibility for you to assess learning. When I say you, I'm talking about our teachers, our principals. How do you want to assess learning? How do you show growth? And one of the things too is to have that local flexibility. I'm going to say this, and I've said it several times. If local districts give us a local accountability system that gives them 100% across the board, it's not worth the paper it's written on, nor is it worth the website that's posted to. The focus here is about growth. We want each district to have the opportunity to label different opportunities within a district to say, for example, one district uses as part of their local accountability model a student well-being. What percentage of our students are involved in extracurricular and co-curricular activities? Their community wanted that information, and then they did plans to improve the student activities so that they would be involved in your academic teams, your band, your football team. Because if you look at some of the best indicators for success at the post-secondary level is, are they involved outside the classroom? That local community saw the value in that and wanted to have that part of their local accountability, and they have that. We want to promote that. But also, too, we want to set up collaboration among groups, not only collaboration within the community, but also collaboration among districts. How can we, with the same socioeconomic status, take districts and put them together and say, how do we lift each other up? How do we learn from each other? These are the resources we have. These are the opportunities we have for our kids. And we want to take those local accountability models and team people up so they lift each other up and work together to make a better system for our kids. So my job is to transition into the agenda for tonight. And I think I'm pretty much on. Oh, yes. Great. I did the welcome and introduction. You heard me talk about vibrant learning and the vibrant learning innovation when it comes to accountability and also collaboration. Those 3 key ideas. We're going to show you what vibrant learning looks like. And we'll also have a district to talk about local accountability and their story. Thank you for that. We want you to see that. We're going to go more in depth in Model Work 2.0. And then we'll have a question and answer session. So, that being said, our first was vibrant learning. Snipes, are you taking care of that?
Well, good afternoon. I don't get the privilege of walking around like the commissioner, so I'll do my best not to stray from our mic here. Appreciate you all just being here today. It's so great to see a room full of people who care, and most importantly, care about our kids. And so I'm Sarah Snipes. I am our director in the Division of Innovation at the Department of Education. And so excited to talk to you a little bit about the work that we do to transform the student experience, not only to drive high student achievement and excellence in academics, but to really wrap supports around the whole child and really push and encourage them to be their best selves well into their future in whatever that path may look like. So before we get started, and I mentioned this just a moment ago, you're here because most deeply you care about kids. And so we don't do this enough, really center in education our conversation truly around a child. So just want to ground our conversations tonight in that mindset. So everyone probably has a device of some sort on them tonight, be it a laptop, a phone. Take a moment, pull it up, find that picture of a child who means something special to you, a student, a niece, nephew, grandchild, child. I've got a photo of my Ben here from his Christmas band concert. Just want to reflect and ground your thinking tonight around that child. What kind of learner are they? How do they present as their best, most passionate self? What kind of learning experiences do you want for them? If you look well into their future, what does that look like? Your biggest hopes and dreams for them as learners. Just want to think about that. As you pull up those images, just turn to somebody next to you, say hi if you don't know a familiar face, and just brag for a moment about that child. Speak their name into the space and share just a little something about them. Thank you so very much. Just take a moment, as I mentioned, let's just on the count of three, speak that child's name out loud. Whoever you chose. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So the conversations that we're going to have tonight, keep that person in your mind. Keep them centered, your thoughts centered on them, because the things that we talk about tonight are going to impact them. And you'll likely see mention of the experiences they've had as learners. And again, make connections to what you hope for them in the future. So I'm going to make a few comparisons for you. Raise your hand just quickly if you've ever sat down to learn about pollinators and perhaps read a chapter in a textbook at some point in your life on pollinators. Keep your hand raised if you probably finished by taking a multiple choice quiz on said pollinators. Great. Yeah, I mean, we've all graduated. We have our diplomas and probably have a wealth of knowledge now about pollinators and the impact that they have on their ecosystems. Nothing wrong with getting information from text and memorizing facts and information that's necessary to apply and build our knowledge in core areas like science. However, I do want to draw a comparison to that, to something that's happening in our Kentucky schools today. I want to compare that to a vibrant learning experience instead, where that child you just mentioned out loud does research on the pollinators in their backyard, thinking about building a community pollinator garden on their school grounds, and culminating that research project into a presentation to community members, let's say their local school board, to then invest more money into the sustainability of that project for students year after year as fifth graders. So thinking about the core content being the same, they're researching, they're studying the impact of pollinators in their environment, but instead taking that knowledge beyond paper and pencil and applying it to better their own school community and perhaps even their community at large. Another comparison, the good old human body systems textbook, thinking about learning about the circulatory system. Again, really important for us to know. Diving in as an individual, studying that textbook, thinking about the parts of the circulatory system that we need to memorize in order to demonstrate that knowledge and understanding on an assessment. But I want to draw a comparison to a more vibrant learning experience instead. How could we take the circulatory system and have students dive deeply into an exploration of a young girl named McKenna, who isn't feeling right? The doctors can't figure out what's happening to her. She has all these symptoms and knows what she's feeling in her body, but no one can quite tell her what's going on and how to fix it. So students instead are going to do a deep dive into the body systems based on the symptoms that she's showing. And they're actually going to listen to an interview with McKenna so that she can firsthand share her experience. And they're going to come up with a treatment plan and hopefully come up with what they think is actually McKenna's health ailment. And a last example here for you is to think about To Kill a Mockingbird. Reading a novel in your class, perhaps getting 10 to 15 minutes each day in your English class to read part of a novel, having a discussion, taking a test to make sure that you've understood the content in each chapter along the way. Diving into a literary text, instead perhaps in discussion, where you think about the Jim Crow South and make comparisons to the novel and work with your school on an Activist Week project to create a video that advocates for changes that you see need to be made within your own school community based on the realities that may still be true today as they are in the past painted within the novel. So thinking more about that collaborative spirit, pairing students together to use technology and discussion to enrich the experience and make real relevant connections to their school and the impacts that that novel still has on them today as students. So I've gone through a few examples of comparisons, and I want to be clear, none of the examples that I shared were bad. The traditional approach and the more vibrant approach. But what I hope you get out of that is a shift and transformation that hopefully helps our kids want to be at school. Hopefully helps develop them as human beings who are strong members of their society well beyond the time they leave and graduate our high schools. Gives them the skills they need to be successful in life. So thinking about this definition, we had a group of people from the Kentucky Council go out and see schools across the Commonwealth. And they came back together with a very specific task: define vibrant learning, now that you've seen it. And what we came up with is really it's learning that matters to students. And you see some bolded words here. It's relevant. These examples were to the real world. They were joyful learning opportunities. Students were honoring their own cultural background, their own background, their gifts, and their own interests. And vibrant learning, as you saw in some of those examples, culminating in a personalized project where the student takes ownership of a unique something that they created. Just want to add, we could have students up here all day long, would be my preference, sharing their own vibrant learning experiences. But do want to lift up an example out of Spencer County Middle School. Students there were asked to build a dream home. And this student here expressed what I just mentioned in the definition. She loves to create. She loves art. And so when she entered her math class and found out that they were going to build a dream house, she got sick because she could still learn to apply her mathematics skills, but she got to do it in a way that meant something to her. A student that we weren't able to feature here, and I did this on my own time 3 different times because I wasn't okay with the result yet. Wow. A student who, he said, I'm normally just bored and I go home and I play, but instead I felt so passionate about going home to engage in this project.
One of the things that some other, and again, these are things that are happening across our Commonwealth, and we want to spread that. We want our students one more vibrant learning experience, and this is out of a region, actually. It's called the Tiny House Project. You have students that are getting together, designing tiny homes. A carpentry class is building it. An engineering class first of all is designing it. Art classes are painting it. Electricity classes are wiring it. And then you have finance classes that are working on the budget on how to make sure they stay within a budget. And also, too, one of the houses that was they put these up for auction. And one of the houses, I can tell you all kinds of stories about these houses. One of the houses was purchased by someone that came from California, purchased it, drove it all the way back and took pictures and sent it back to the students. That tiny house is now on the Pacific Ocean, on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, and those kids built that. As a matter of fact, we have some kids that have continued to have their own businesses with this. Those are vibrant learning. This is turned into authentic things that those kids can do in real life. But can you imagine that type of project? They had a $10,000 budget. They sold it for probably 12 or 13,000. I see some superintendents in the room are very familiar with this program. And then they invest all that back into the next tiny house, which needs to be better, bigger and better, and have solar panels, and it needs to have other features so they can get more money. That's vibrant.
And it's really a shame that we can't spend 2 hours sharing with you from east, north, southwest. But that's just one of the reasons we have a district here with us to just lift up and share even more of those examples. Just to touch on before handing it over to them. Kentucky's Board of Education adopted a portrait of a learner. And so based on what communities were already doing, districts were already doing across our state, the board gave a nod to that and said, we see you developing students' skills, their knowledge, their dispositions in these lifelong competencies. They go beyond just academics. Certainly nested within there are core academics, but really those things that employers say they want: communication, critical thinking, being an engaged citizen. So Kentucky's Portrait of a Learner will often come up, and it will come up for you presentation as well, thinking about those skills beyond academics as they solely are. And so thinking about combining those efforts, really honoring a student's experiences, and how do we build up those skills in our students so that they are leaders in our community, again, well beyond graduation. Do want to acknowledge as well that this is something that's organically taking off in our community without any sort of mandate or requirement. 140 plus districts are developing or have developed a set of skills that their community said is important to them. That looks different in Woodford County than it does from Anderson County. It looks different in Danville Independent as it does from Floyd County. And so communities getting together in rooms like this and saying, this is the picture of our future and our graduates. And so 140 communities, again, have had those conversations. Probably many of you in this room have even been part of those discussions. And so you'll see that tied in as well in the framework, as Dr. Stafford mentions later, the honoring this organic work that's kind of taken root in communities along the way. Was warned this might happen. Just to make a quick connection back to Dr. Fletcher's introduction, thinking through the framework and our district presentation, keeping this moonshot and that child you mentioned at the beginning in mind. If we get this right, that we mentioned will have a fulfilling future in a more prosperous Kentucky, because we will have launched an accountability system that's meaningful and useful for them. Single Kentucky learner. So keep that connection in mind as well. And I will turn it over now to our Woodford County team. Ryan Asher, Susan Tracy, and Scott Hunley are with us today, as well as some support in their corner as well. We're so excited to hear from them the efforts that they've made in terms of holding themselves accountable to their communities to hires. I do want to mention that in your chair, you had a very small slip of paper. If you need another, we'll be happy to run that to you. This is a question card for time, but also to honor your interest in your inquiries. If you have a question as this presentation goes on for the district or later on for the framework, just write it down as they speak. And someone from the back will come around and collect that for you. And then after the district's presentation, we will have dedicated time to ask those questions out loud to our presenters, and they can get your responses. If for some reason time is a limit and we cannot get to your question tonight, please do not worry. We will make sure you get an answer. That's part of the reason that we're asking that you write your questions down. And again, if you need these, let us know. A raised hand, we'll make sure that you get a question card. All right, our Woodford County team, I'm going to pass things over to you. And to think about local accountability and what it means to build a system for your community.
Does that work for us? We'll see. What is that?
Mic up.
Oh, okay. How about this? Where would I point to?
Right, back here. So
Back there, do you want it?
here you go. Switch it out for you.
Well, while we're doing that, my name's Ryan Hensher. I'm the Chief Academic Officer of Woodford County. I've been in the district 19 years, my 25th year overall of education. And my counterpart introduce herself.
I'm Susan Tracy. I'm the Director of Student Achievement of the district. This is year 27 for me in education, but year 22 in Woodford.
So we always make note to mention our time in Woodford because of just our investment in the district and how we want to see it continuously improve and innovate and iterate for the betterment of our students. And to make a connection back to what Sarah talked about, we also are very invested as we have students in the district. I have 3 myself as the she, and this we're going to go through is not only what we want for all students, but certainly our students as well. In fact, I'm a little sad because I have 2 seniors, but seniors, and they're not going to get the benefit of some of this. I'm not going to get to see them do those defensive learning, but it's my goal that my 8th grader, I'll get to see him do it. I also want to make mention, Scott Huntley was mentioned. He's on our curriculum instruction team. Elaine Bailey, who is our communications, our PR, and our superintendent, Dan Atkins, as they, while we've facilitated and led a lot of this work that you'll see, they certainly have been supporting, been an integral part throughout the past few years. Oh, goodness, it's working well now. All right, little bit more about us. Versailles is our county seat in Woodford County. We have 7 schools, 4 elementary, 1 middle, 1 high, and 1 alternative. A little over 4,000 students. That's including our preschool all the way through 12th grade. Approximately 248 teachers. Our story of how we got here. I will say the spark at the very beginning was Mr. Atkins saying, let's look at this portrait work, this profile work. What can we do with it? And we are big on green light culture. So he gave us the green light and we just ran with it. But originally inspired by United We Learn, as Commissioner mentioned, and that just kind of lit a fire. And from there, the supportive element within these walls right here was our Deeper Learning grant. Susan and I led that Deeper Learning team, a collaborative team of teachers over the course of 2 years, which was very important in developing our portrait. We focused on establishing competencies for our students, and that's the logo that you see there in the bottom right, from resilient learner, creative problem solver, empathetic communicator, reflective collaborator, and responsible contributor. That was developed, as it says there, with that group of teachers, the Deeper Learning team, along with community surveys, student surveys, and it went through the ringer, as I call it, several levels to be developed over the course of 4 months. Thanks to Susan Dugal and Dr. Lou Young and UK Next Gen, who really had that process down pat and made it really efficient and effective. A couple things I want to mention about our portrait, including the input we had from community. There's a very specifically, now you can't quite tell in the round format, but in our posters, resilient learner is always first. Because that came out again and again. We can collect the academic competency to be first. And there's a story for each one of those. but don't quite have the time for that today. We always revisit our why of why we have a portrait. Those 3 bullets you see there at the bottom, a collective vision of student success for the entire community. And I'll explain a little bit more on how we involve them. That set of competencies that again, we want for all students. In fact, we want them for our adults as well. We want to work with reflective collaborators, right? So we also have adopted some language about our belief statements and all the things that we do as adults in our collaborative meetings to also use this language there. And then finally, a foundational tool that should guide all of our work related to school moving forward. See, next slide. That was the let's see, 22-23 was the real development year of it. Now it's time to roll it out. And we came up with this little gimmicky of learn, launch, look. We didn't want to go too heavy on our teachers, first and foremost, nor our community. We just wanted to take a full year of 23-24 to learn the competencies. Let's launch this language. Let's start using it in the meetings I mentioned. Let's start using it in classrooms. Let's start using it in faculty meetings, and then finally look. And it was really our deeper learning teachers that I mentioned that's what we charged them with. You guys, green light. Let's go look for these opportunities in your classrooms to find ways to incorporate these competencies. Commissioner mentioned vibrant learning a lot. We really say deeper learning, kind of synonymous the two. So we kind of go back and forth. You're going to hear a lot about deeper learning in this one. Before we get into a little bit more, I want to talk about the community engagement piece that I mentioned a couple of times. One thing we're really excited, we're taking a next step with this next week, is we needed community engagement. We have great community support, but we wanted to align it and really just to connect to our portrait. So over time, we came up with this concept called our Woodford Wins Community Partner Network. And so what you see here is the logo, thanks to Elaine Bailey, and then a couple of pictures of recruiting events that we did. This one was at our local chamber. We did one at the library. We did one at a school building to recruit folks to explain what the portrait is all about and how they can engage and involve themselves in working with us. So as I mentioned, we have next week. Even from that, I think we've got a list of probably 40 plus folks, community, business leaders, church leaders that have signed up. Yes, we want to be part of this network. We have this vision where they get a sticker, they get a t-shirt. We're going to make it a secret club that they can get in. And from that, we developed some leaders that are going to take do some action planning next week on these things here. One thing we're excited about is a Help Wanted virtual board for community partners to post Help Wanted for certain service project opportunities, collaborative efforts to support post-secondary readiness, and just so on and so forth there. A number of ways that we can engage community. So excited about those next steps there. Back to the Learn, Launch, Look. Over time, over that first year, these same themes kept coming up again and again. And moving into year 2, we're like, okay, how do we take the abstract concept of this portrait of a learner and make it concrete? Well, these themes, we decided, well, let's get cute with this, so to speak. And these are our paths. These are our paths to the portrait that we're going to focus on: deeper learning, demonstrations of learning, technology and innovation, career readiness, and community engagement. So real quickly here, and we'll have some photos of students and staff involved in these. And I'm going to hand it over to Susan to talk more about deeper learning.
And so, much like was mentioned earlier, for the definition for vibrant learning, we did the same thing. We made a collective definition that worked for our community and our stakeholders for each one of these individual pieces of the paths to our portrait. When we were talking about deeper learning, Ryan mentioned that it's going to have to be very what's being mentioned as vibrant learning. So if you're hearing, looking at things from the state, you might see the words vibrant learning, but we are using that synonymously with our deeper learning language. So some examples, so you can see specifics here in Woodford County under our deeper learning instruction. And we really talked about the delivery and changing. I love the way that Sarah did the kind of the traditional in the black and white, and then the more vibrant in color. These are some of our examples of our vibrant experiences. In the first picture sure you're going to see some Northside students in our elementary, starting at the youngest age. I believe that's a first grade classroom, and they're using hexagonal thinking. And it's a strategy that they're using our portrait of a learner competency. You'll see the individual icons down at the bottom of the screen, but they're putting those to action. That was what we really wanted to get on these paths, or how do we get across the message? This is what our community wants to see. This is what our stakeholders feel are important for our learners here in Woodford County. But how do we bridge that for our teachers? How do we get them to feel like it's not one more thing on their plate? And so the paths that we came up with are part of that. These learners there, they were learning how to be empathetic communicators. If you see me do hand gestures, we do those in Woodford County too. So empathetic communicators, that's how we signal that. In the second one, we've got some construction going on next to one of our elementaries. We're expanding the neighborhood, and so that's by Southside Elementary. And you see students there that actually visited the work site right next door to them, and then came back and they're designing a project builds on their own. And so much like was mentioned in Spencer County, there are similar projects that are going on in each one of our little communities. And so that's an example of that vibrant experience at Southside. In the fourth picture, that looks like a crime scene, a fake crime scene. That's at our Safe Harbor Academy, which is our alternative school. So this is not just at an elementary school or just at our high school. We want this for our K-12 learners. And instead of just doing the textbook traditional experience, they are studying a crime scene and coming up with the whodunit themselves. In the fifth and sixth, those are both pictures about a project that happened last year, the year before, a purpose and action. They worked. There was a small group of students that worked, and then it kind of expanded. We got some of our students with disabilities involved, as you'll see there. But their job was to create a work cell space for an actual company, and it was kind of a competition. You know, it was going to say whose work cell wins the competition. But in the competition, they had the opportunity to research. They went to the workspace. The students with every student on the project got to go and visit and hear from some of the students in the wheelchairs. You know, what are your accessibility issues or concerns as you go through this? So it was a real life learning experience to see things from another eye. You know, we think that when we walk into a building, it's accessible for everyone, but they made a work cell space, and it wasn't just about wheelchairs. It was about colorblind. You know, they made sure that the materials that they used in that were meeting the needs of all five senses as well, for various disabilities. On that path, with each one of these paths actually, but this is a snapshot of our strategic plan. And so this is draft form. If you look at this in 2 or 3 months from now, it's not going to look the same because this is the work in progress that we're working on right now. But we have taken similar stakeholders together, and for each one of these paths, we have already worked on the deeper learning and the demonstrations of learning paths. We have worked on the career readiness and community engagement, and we have a date set in February. We're going to start the planning for the technology and innovation. Thanks to Mark Helton at the back. He's doing some construction planning with us, and the strategic plan is coming out of that. But this is a way for us to make sure that this really takes teeth, takes hold in Woodford County, that we're moving forward with this, and we're embedding our deeper learning instruction into our PD design. It really should be our North Star. And in the corner there at the bottom, you see one of the meetings with stakeholders really making and getting to the getting down into the planning and the important pieces. One of the pieces that, another way that we're driving this deeper learning home is we have a deeper learning academy we partnered with CKEC here. We do a month in Woodford County. We do a month here at CKEC, but it's just more training, getting small groups into really these vibrant experiences so that it has a ripple effect in our district. Demonstrations of learning, those have been mentioned a couple of times at a couple of different points tonight, but that is something that we're working on as well. In our definition that we came up with here on the screen, we are really focusing on 3 pieces: the student-led conferences, the exhibitions of learning, and the demonstration of learning. Here's some examples of our students in action doing that. The first 2 are again at Northside, and those are exhibitions of learning. That was a colony project, I believe, for maybe our 5th graders. And they are not just writing an essay or filling out a multiple choice exam, but they did the research, they made the presentation, and they are practicing their communication skills in public for an audience. And so not only do other teachers come in and other classes, but the community can come in, and we have district members that come in as well. Down at the bottom, this is at our middle school, so we haven't talked about them, but they are doing demonstrations of learning, and they are really actually focusing on the competencies of our portrait. And we're not too defensive yet in there, but in that progress, you have to just jump in. You have to start somewhere. You have to take a leap. And our middle school is doing that by having a time of their day dedicated to the portrait, learning the competencies, and then they are presenting on how they feel they are using those competencies in their learning, what vibrant experiences are matching up with. And so they're differences, but they're practicing. We're getting there. Again, this is our demonstration strategic plan, and it's just the draft, but an example of how we're getting there. To point out all the way over in the 27-28, in this plan, we're looking for defenses to be full scale by 27-28 year. Our technology and innovation path, again, our own definition of what it means for technology and innovation in Woodford County. We really want to set kids up to be future leaders, future innovators, and problem solvers on this path. We have partnered with Midway University, and so there is an academy for this also, where teachers come in. We are setting them up, hoping for that ripple effect again. And Midway University has been a great partner in that innovation and technology piece. Here are some pictures from that. The first 2 are pictures from that deep learning or the Technology and Innovation Academy. When you get down further, the 3rd one is
Robot dog.
Thank you. The 3rd and the 4th one, maybe. No, the 3rd one only is a robot dog. The 4th one is a VR virtual field trip that the kids are on. The 4th one is
one of our student tech workers.
Thank you. And it had to do with our 3D printing too. That has been one of our big. So student workers working with our tech and our 3D printing. And then just recently, the 6th picture down there is our early learning bus that is filled with experiences for our youngest learners to innovate, create, solve, and go on the road, like take it out to the communities, do some of our earliest screenings there in a way that they want to. It's a vibrant experience for them. They want to be there. Who wouldn't want to get on that bus? I won't pass it back.
How are we doing on time, Charlie? All right, very good. All right, I'll take the last 2 paths here. Career readiness, again, we think it's very important to define, right? What is that, rather than just a little path or road sign? That it is more, because oftentimes when you say that, it oftentimes is just career day. And when we first got a group together, we do career day, we do this. And we actually went to the standard, the KDE standards along these lines, and there's so much more. So along those lines, oh, pardon me. A few things that we're doing to take a step forward on that is I had done this in the past with one of our elementary schools is Junior Achievement BizTown. So here's another example of partnering with the community. But we're going to have all of our fifth graders take part in this project. Essentially, there are a series of lessons that of adulting lessons, and eventually they'll take that trip. What you see there to BizTown, to where they're assigned a job. They will vote for a mayor. They will go through their bill paying and shopping, things like that, all in this town. Obviously, picking up real life skills and career exploration. Second one there is kind of an advanced piece to that of more adulting. That this is a tradition called Reality Store. That these are middle school students. The difference here would be that is hosted locally. We have KCTCS, and they allow us to use their facility. The folks that you see there working that booth in number 2 are from actual, I believe they may be bank employees, community bank. And again, kind of an adulting activity for the students to where they're assigned a job, the number of kids that they have. So they might make that purchase of the big car, but then realize they don't have enough to pay the electric bill or what have you. So it's a good lesson for them. 3 and 4 kind of go together. They are just those hands-on experiences we are trying to increase and enhance for all. So there's an example of an ag activity. I think that's sheep shearing they're doing. Then in our engineering classroom, young man doing some engineering, some metalworking, it looks like. Number 5 goes back to what Susan had talked about, the purpose and action. It was a competition and they won it. So here they were, they hosted a recognition ceremony at the Woodford County High School, and then of that group with their plaque. And then 6 goes back to another one that Susan mentioned. I just love this one because the hands on the head and their faces. I know it's kind of small for you, but just shows the awe that they had in watching that bulldozer move the dirt around. But that was excellent. They had construction going on in the backyard. How can we use this as a learning opportunity? And so those are some career readiness examples we're trying to do. Finally, community engagement. I've mentioned a lot about this already and how Woodford Wins is our main structure, our main vehicle for community engagement to both enhance and better align it. And here's some examples that come out of that. Number 2, there, the picture is a long tradition we have of Industry Day. So there are high school students that go around and tour local industries. This one is actually Ruggles Sign, who design, manufacture signs that go all over the world. I went there myself, and there was a Nike swoop probably half the size of this room. I was fascinated by it. It's obviously a cool experience and connection for our students. Number 3 are Woodford County Library reps that are at one of our back to school events. Great community partner, part of the network. We host meetings there. And then 4 and 5 are GEMS program, Girls in Engineering, Math, and Science. That Stephanie Stell, the high school teacher, helps facilitate, but is able to do that because of community partners. I believe that's the local conservation district and just some parent volunteers who help that program be successful. I want to make sure to mention, I believe both previous presenters mentioned this, just how this is going on all over. And I want to mention our peers that we've been working with, and it's been a number of them, but most specifically Shelby, Logan, Clark, Rowan, and Johnson County. We've taken a couple field trips to Shelby County, their defenses. They've been doing it for quite a while. That's where Susan Dougal was part of that work, and we're really inspired by that. And it's gone both ways. Clark is coming to visit us. They're learning from us, and vice versa. We're learning from them. So it's really been a collaborative peer supported network as titled there. Where we're going next with it is continue down these paths. But this is where the accountability piece comes in. We're accountable to that portrait. We're accountable to these paths that lead to that portrait. So we want the strategic planning. You saw the draft of the 2 paths that we have going. The plan, as Susan mentioned, is to develop those for all 5 areas to take us out for the next several years. And as I started with at the very beginning, just to continue to create that collective vision and use our portrait as that foundational tool moving forward. So greatly appreciate. We're honored to share our story. It's not done yet, but we feel like we're off to a good start. Thank you. Okay.
I want to check with our back here. And if you had a chance and have a question or wondering for our district presenters, if you haven't had a chance to write that down, please do so. Do we have any questions currently in the back? And we will, if you're stewing on it, thinking about it, taking it all in, just thank you again for sharing. They're going to be here for the remainder of our session, and we will have another time to open up for some questions and discussion at the end. So I know everyone's eager to dive into the framework, see the connections to what you've heard so far. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Jennifer Stafford. Take it from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would have ask you in 50 years from now, it'll be 2075. 2075, 50 years. What will the world look like then? Can you imagine? Can you even imagine what it'll look like in 4 years from now or 10 years from now? But that's the world that we're creating and we're preparing our students for. So think about that child that you just spoke their name, his or her name. In 50 years, how old will he or she be? My son will be ready to retire, hopefully, at that point. And so we are preparing our young ones for a world that's unknown. And these deeper learning experiences, thank you all very much for sharing that and preparing students to be critical thinkers, great collaborators, because it's not a world that we understand right now or that we can technically prepare them for. But we can give them the disposition, we can give them the opportunities to create the skills and develop the knowledge to go into that and be successful in a world that we don't know yet. So when we talk about assessment and accountability, we're talking about these very technical pieces, but we're leveraging that to impact education in the world that your loved one will be entering into. So when we, through these deeper learning experiences, the vibrant learning experiences, we're giving students the opportunity to engage in very personalized, relevant opportunities and in instructional activities that they develop their knowledge and skills in various ways, and that they are deeply engaged in that and they want to learn. The example that Sarah used earlier is that the student went home and did it on his own 3 different times because they wanted to do it better. They wanted to get it right. Well, I'm glad my son will do it once. So, but that's the type of joyful activities that we are envisioning for our students, these vibrant learning experiences. And developing a future of education where students work together collaboratively, where districts work together collaboratively, where schools come together from across the Commonwealth, working together, lifting each other up, and not be compared, not be in competition with each other, but to work. Because we said earlier today, the person who the heart surgeon, he wants them to be the best heart surgeon, whether they're in Wishbrook County or Scott County or Fayette County. Yep. So working collaboratively together to develop networks where teachers work together, district leaders work together, co-ops work together, supporting each other. Moving away from state control, where everything has to be exactly the same. Right now, we have a system that is every school district has to have the same assessment and the same accountability system. Now, those are two different systems. When we talk about assessments, or we talk about this test, the assessment systems are those tests that we're going to talk about. The tests in reading, the tests in math, the social studies, the writing, critically important. Those are tests, those are assessment systems. The accountability system is different than that. Accountability are those indicators of school performance, or the performance of the students within the school. It's the post-secondary readiness indicators and those indicators of graduation rate. Although they're very connected, they're two different things, assessment and accountability. Looking at those to, again, impact our future vision of instruction in the education system in Kentucky. Now, they don't have to be the same. We can have local control where our districts come together and engage with their communities to decide what's important for that community. And it doesn't have to be the same. Right now, we have the same accountability system, and we have to have that standardization when we get to identification of the lowest performing schools. We have to have some of that, but that's not the only piece that we can move toward. Developing systems of support where, again, districts work together, our schools work together collaboratively across the Commonwealth. Bringing it forward and including external evaluators to look at and support our schools, not to evaluate them, but to look for exemplars within our schools and make connections across our schools if they are having some similar obstacles or similar challenges, that they can connect schools from one part of the state to another part of the state. So looking at systems of collaboration, support, and feedback, all for the advancement of our students and our student outcomes in Kentucky. Now, specifically, let's talk about the assessment system and accountability system. And this is the framework that you received when you registered or signed in this afternoon. So there is need for standardization. There's need for that, so that we can see how our students are doing in relation to one another. So there are currently in federal regulation, there are pieces that are required both in the assessment system and in the accountability system. So again, we're going to talk about both of those systems. For accountability, in that statewide federally required system, there are indicators that must be included in an accountability system that would identify then that those lowest performing schools, comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support, and additional targeted support and improvement. So those pieces, when you get to those identifications, they have to be the same so that you can make that comparison. So that's the indicators of reading and math. Those indicators, we've heard very strongly that our school districts and our Commonwealth wants to move away from a change element that's currently in individual student growth. Individual student growth is where you get a student and where you take a student, specifically in reading and math. Okay, so we're looking at systems that values that growth of that individual student, so that we can see that students are moving forward in their learning of reading and math. Looking at not changing anything around transition readiness or post-secondary readiness. And those are the indicators that provide feedback on students going on to whether they want to go on to college or careers. So looking at continuing those type of opportunities for our students. Looking at graduation rate as an accountability indicator that includes both the 4-year and that persistence to graduation, that valuable 5th year rate that values that hard work that the student is putting in, the parents are putting in, and the teachers within their toward that persistence toward graduation. Our English language progress, valuing the progress that our English learners are having in acquisition of the English language. So continuing with that valuing within that system. Now, the final piece there that is federally required as an indicator for accountability is a school quality measure. Right now, it is the Climate and Safety Survey. All students currently take a survey that, at the tested grades that indicate how they feel toward their school and whether it's safe and whether what the climate is within there. So that is an important piece of the accountability that we've heard very strongly that people want to continue with that in the accountability system. So those pieces, those 5 bullets would be part of a standardized federal accountability system that would then identify schools for supports. Now, what's also common is, and currently required in federal law, is that all students, once per grade base, once at elementary, once at middle, and once at high, they all take a common or the same science assessment and it be reported. Now, that science assessment is required to be administered and reported. It's not required by current federal law to be included in the accountability system. So you'll notice that that science assessment is required as a federal measure in assessment, but not included in that accountability system. So again, required to be assessed and reported, but not required to be in that federal accountability piece. Now, the other 2 measures, the choice measures and the local measures, are like the second very separate, distinct accountability system. So the one with statewide, federal, that's one system that would identify those schools for supports. The other system would be a local system that would include both choice measures as well as the local measures. Now, engaging in our communities in what they want to have in a local accountability system. And you've seen a demonstration tonight of what a local accountability system would look like. Looking at choice measures that are required to be in your local accountability system, but the choice of which the school or district and their local communities could determine how to meet those. So we'll start with social studies and writing. The state is proposing to create an option of a science assessment in every grade 3 through 10. So valuing that well-rounded education that all students should have and having social studies and writing assessed every single year, 3 through 10, and reported on. The choice would be that the local district could, if they had the capacity, have their own authentic demonstrations of science and writing that would be then included in that local accountability system. So currently we have social studies in that state system. This framework shifts it from that federal accountability to a local accountability, required in local, but the option would be that the schools could either opt into a state assessment, or they would have their own to be included in a local system.
If I may, Dr. Staff.
Sure.
As you look through this is very different to have opt-in portions of accountability. When we talk about opt-in, for example, we, in the state measures, those portions that Dr. Stafford talked about goes together to do an overall calculation when it comes for CSI, TSI, and ACSI designations. That's your typical. But what we're saying is districts need to evaluate and need to hold their students accountable and their districts accountable for social studies and writing. You may have the systems in place for a competency-based type system in social studies. You may have the system in place where you have performance-based assessments in writing. You may have that already, and you're welcome to use that. But if you don't, then the state will provide an assessment in social studies grades 3 through 10 that you can take and include in your accountability model. So again, when you look at those opt-in, it's like, okay, if you have a system that you believe that's a part of your portion of the learner that really assesses the social studies and looks at civics and looks at different parts that how can we really evaluate what we're doing in our, as a matter of fact, it's required for you to teach social studies. It's required for you to teach writing. It's part of state law. How do you assess it? How do you do that now? So we're offering some an opt-in option where you can give those tests 3 through 10. Again, in social studies writing, and we're also looking at doing that for science, or if you want to be a part of that too, but mainly social studies and writing. Or your district can have its own method of measuring social studies and writing that you believe in. You know, we've heard a presentation earlier today from Secretary of State, our Secretary of State Adams, that was talking about civics badging and civics health, and you know what exactly students can learn from the civics. And it was all about, and honestly, the presentation they gave was all vibrant learning looking experiences. That's what it was. How do you get your students engaged in their communities? How do you get them engaged and doing presentations and also collaborating and also advocating for themselves? A lot of what he presented, I would classify fully as deeper learning and or vibrant learning. So those are the type of things that we're looking at for social studies. If you have a system within your district that you believe in, you can use that. But if you need our assessments, we would offer that. Now, those are optional for social studies and writing. Of course, reading and math is not optional. The individual growth is not optional, but those are the parts we're saying would be optional for you, how you would incorporate it into your local accountability system. Now, I say you still, as right now, 2.0, we have it is social studies and writing is required in your local accountability. We're just trying to help you on how would you demonstrate that. It's required. The option is how do you choose to demonstrate that within your district?
Thank you, Commissioner. The next bullet there, that again would be required, but the flexibility would be how to include vibrant learning experiences. We heard and saw a definition of vibrant learning experiences. Ryan and Susan created or presented several different types of vibrant learning experiences. So how would your district do that and include that into your local accountability system? The Kentucky United We Learn Council, they have come up with a menu of options that includes such things as capstone projects, defenses of learning, and things of that nature. But it would be your local district and your local decision on how you would provide those vibrant learning opportunities to your students to, again, include in those that local accountability measure. That third bullet there around your choice measure would be interim assessments. So these interim assessments are ways in which to give back information specific to your student or your child in your local school district around reading and math. So expanding and replacing currently replacing the interim assessments that are provided by the school or district, such as your math or your STAR, your iReady, if you're one of those, if you're using one of those. Currently replacing those with a state developed system that would provide instructional information for your teachers and your parents, your students, that could be utilized for instructional purposes on a quicker turnaround in that.
And to add to
Yeah.
that, you know, and again, keep in mind, we're listening to you. So we're hearing from a lot of districts, and I'm telling you about some of the input we've had so far that really prefer to use their iReady or their STAR or their map that they're using now. So one of the things that we're discussing, and maybe in 3.0, is if districts want to utilize their own interim assessment. Now, again, keep in mind the summative reading and math. Think about if we have anything in a federal accountability, it has to be uniform. So the summative assessment and reading math has to be uniform throughout the state because that's how CSI, TSI, and ATSI schools are identified. So the summative assessment has to be the same. What we're wanting to develop are interim assessments that align perfectly, as perfectly as possible, with the summative assessment so that teachers don't have to wait till the fall to get instructional data on their students to change instruction for the next day. They're able to make those decisions. Now, some of you, or all of us, as a matter of fact, are using different testing models like MAP, STAR, and iReady. We're hearing from districts we'd like to keep our own, but and maybe have the interim assessments as an opt-in. Again, the summative assessment is not opt-in. That's part of the federal accountability piece. That is not opt-in. And right now in 2.0, we have interim assessments as something that we would replace districts, MAP, STAR, and iReady. But some of the feedback we're getting so far is we would prefer to use our interim assessments and maybe not ones that are developed by the state. So we were looking at maybe that could be an opt-in. So if you have an opinion on that, please put that on your card and give that to us. So that's what the point of these town halls is, to hear your opinions on any part of this. But again, to let you know that we're listening as we go through.
So then your local accountability system would be then aligned to the priorities of your community. So the shared assurances around that local accountability system, much like what Woodford County has done, is engaged with their communities, engaged with their business leaders, their industry leaders, their parents, community chambers of commerce, faith leaders, students, bringing together the community to have input on what they want to see and hold their schools accountable for their students. Now, some of the things that we've seen aligned to that portrait of a learner have varied greatly. And again, the local accountability system is local. It doesn't have to have that comparability to your neighboring districts or the district. We've heard things, as the commissioner mentioned earlier, that the possibly having the percentage of students who are engaged in extracurricular or co-curricular activities, that's an indicator of success for your students and lead to better outcomes. Other examples that we emotional learning and providing supports for that. So part of a community could say, we want our students to have resources and supports for their social emotional learning.
You could also look at this as a continuum. Let's take vibrant learning, for example. If the district is just getting into this, measuring vibrant learning, it could start off as what percentage of our students are involved in defenses of learning or capstone projects or internships, apprenticeships. It could be what percentage of our students are involved in these type of learning experiences. Then as time passes, that could expand into what is the value, or what level are these vibrant learning experiences for our students. So again, it could start off as more of a what percentage are involved, and it can move to more of a quality measure. What's the quality of the things that, again, that's developed for the local community. I'm not going to tell you that as commissioners. That's up to you and your community on how to develop that.
And so what we've seen in these districts that have already been part of this initiative and this move toward local accountability is that the community really embraces the schools and that our students are benefiting from that support, and our schools are benefiting from that support. So moving toward this local accountability system with the balance of the federal system is the vision that we have for the assessment and accountability system. So looking at how this could happen. So we can't just pass legislation and it would just happen. It would take time for that because our districts need to build the capacity. Our students need to build the capacity. Our leaders need the capacity to build such systems. So looking at some districts that have already engaged in some of this, local labs of learning, and looking at developing support systems so that they're piloting this type of program and then learning from each other, building in an expansion phase. So having a phase-in approach for taking this across the Commonwealth. So before I turn it over to the commissioner, just one more final thought is that you're here because you have an educational interest. You're here because you want what across the Commonwealth. So we encourage you to engage with your local school district, engage with your schools, and be a part of that progress that we're all looking for in our education.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stafford. And if you take out the pictures of the kids, I want to show you my favorite slide. Right there. This is what our dream is of collaboration with community to lift each other up. I've seen some posts on social media where Woodford County and Clark County. Sorry, I broke a rule already. Commissioner prerogative. But to see this collaboration where, let's call Clark County and say, okay, this is where you are, this is where we are, let's share that. If you would go back, Shelby County was one of the very first schools to do the Portrait of Learner work years ago. And there is so much of a foundation, but they're just now getting into local accountability. And if you were to get on their website and look at their local accountability model right now, they're using data and graphs to tell their story, but they also have interviews with people of how this has changed their district and the experience for their kids. So their accountability dashboard is more than just numbers. It's also storytelling. But you have people calling each other, say, how can we learn from each other? How can we lift each other up? These districts all have similar type of resources, we'll say. But then they're learning from each other, lifting each other up. So again, those three main pieces, as you go through that I mentioned a lot earlier. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Vibrant learning for all students. Think about the student or the child that you mentioned a little bit earlier. I guarantee that they're getting some of these experiences each and every day. But how can we expand that? Make sure that this is what our schools look like. How do we hold each other accountable? And develop an accountability system that's going to do this to standardize for every single person. That's why the local accountability piece is so important. It is so important. Because if you're going to have an accountability system that is useful and meaningful for all learners, you have to take the individuality of the student, the community, and the district in order to have that effective system. So that being said, that gives us plenty of time for some questions and answers, and I've messed this up already. Am I going backwards? Am I going the wrong way? Okay. There you go. I got so excited about all the pictures of the students, I couldn't help them. So, what kind of questions can we answer for you? Also, the parts of federal accountability, we're embracing that. We're taking the literacy and numeracy work, the letters training, all the things that's going on in our district. We still feel, we know without a shadow of doubt that we have to have that strong foundation for our kids. We have to. But also too, we want these type of opportunities for the kids to go out and participate in their community. How much different would our society look like if our kids had these opportunities in each and every day in our school system? How different is your school because you've incorporated these like this? How much excitement are you seeing in teachers? We're empowering teachers to develop accountability systems. We're empowering administrators to do that. We're also empowering students to take on that personalized role. This is what is relevant to me. This is how I'm going to be a leader. This is the change I can make in my school and in my community. That's different. That's different. So I'll stop there. Questions? First question: who determines if my optional experience is actually measuring proficiency or not? Email address, I'm a fan of the all in. Thank you very much for that. Who determines my optional experience is actually measuring proficiency or not? If it's part of the federal accountability, there will be measures that we set. On the local accountability part, or are you talking about the opt-in portion?
Yes, yeah.
Those are things that you would determine.
So I would determine if my social studies
Yes.
measure actually measured what I wanted to
Yes. Yes, you would. That's part of that optional piece. You would determine what is proficiency for your students on the optional piece.
Right. That's
On the local accountability, how you define proficiency, or if you even want to use other terminology other than proficiency. Maybe you don't want to even talk about proficiency at all. Maybe it's, did you meet these performance level descriptors or these outcomes? But how do you demonstrate that? How do you get that out in a dashboard or and communicate that to your community? That's the local flexibility. That's ask your community. How do you want us to define this? I think that's best.
When someone is speaking, they use the microphone for the
Okay.
recording equipment.
Yes, yes. Okay, what does accountability system look like at state level in a vibrant learning system and assessment? Is social studies measured? So to answer that question, I think going back to what does the accountability look like at the state level in a vibrant learning system, I think again goes back to how do you define it? Again, what we're measuring within the federal accountability with reading and mathematics, we'll set aside what exactly is proficiency. We'll set aside what exactly, just like we do now. How does that look like when it comes to on the federal accountability piece? But the local accountability piece is really up to your community. You know, I'm not going to come in and tell you that this vibrant learning experience is proficient. I'm going to ask you, as in your local community, how do you define that within your local community? Even if you use proficiency, if you use the term proficiency or not, what exactly does a local accountability system look like that provides vibrant learning? Now, we do have some menu options, and also too, there's also options for how you want to define a vibrant learning experience. What does that look like for you? What does that look like for your community? And that's up to you to determine if a student is successful. That's up to you. That's up to your community. What does your community expect from you? I'm not going to be, well, when I say that is, I need to clarify a little bit. We want to move that to where it matters. What does it matter to your people, to your community, to your business leaders? How does that look for them? How does that look for your child? How does that look for you? Working together. And I think Woodford County, let's give them a round of applause. And I think what you're seeing there, and they gave a great example of why we have to push this out into multiple years, into that pilot area. So even with someone that's worked as diligently in this for Woodford County, they're not going to be ready in 2026 for an accountability system. As a matter of fact, some of the things they're looking at is 27, 28. So pushing that out and making sure that they have that opportunity to define that. So again, as far as a vibrant learning system, there are things that we mentioned of what vibrant learning is. Is social studies measured? Yes, we're requiring it to be measured in your local accountability system. How you do that is up to you. Whether you use an assessment that we provide, or whether your district comes up with a competency-based assessment or performance-based assessment they feel measures the competencies that they set aside for social studies.
You want me to just-
Absolutely.
Okay. So I have questions about the interim assessment system that you're talking about, because I like that idea. But my question is, right now, schools are using things like iReady and STAR because they provide a lot of data analysis. And so when you're talking about doing a system at the state level, is it going to have that kind of support for the schools and the districts so that it's helpful? And then I also wanted to know, are you specifically talking about a universal test? Are you sick? Will it be progress monitoring? Like how, like what depth will it go?
So those are all really good questions. And the goal would be that we would provide instructional relevant information through those interim assessments. And I think that's part of the development of the system. First, we wanted to find out from you, does that sound like something that you would want? And it sounds like those type of things would be through development of a system, procurement, and things of that nature. So, but yes, we would want to provide as much data and information as we could provide. It would be for special education type. There are particular assessments that have to be given and administered in that. We're not in that realm. We're not talking about those type of things.
And some of the in-depth conversations that we're having right now, and again, we have to put out an RFP and have a system bid on, and these are the requirements. One, we want something that is, first of all, we can give that instructional information and data back to a teacher quickly. If we give something to follow, then it'd be very similar to what you're going to see with those type of assessments. But some of the questions that we're having is, do we want to look at a system that has basically a core portion that assesses a static, if you will, that assesses the content standards at grade level, wrapped around an adaptability part that could give us a better indication of what grade level and growth would look like? Because I'll be honest with you, one of the things that I really want to do, and I'll bring this up in any setting, is whatever assessment model we go to, I think we need to have grade level equivalency as a part of that, because you know what? Our parents understand that. And we do too. I guarantee if you were to interview 10 people, maybe even some from KDE, out of office education accountability, out of accountability assessment, anybody outside of that group, and ask them what exactly proficiency was, it's hard to define. It's defined by a group of teachers that come into a room and look at how the performance and data, and they set these cut points, and this is what proficiency is. Well, what does that mean as far as grade level equivalency? Are we having students that are scoring at a proficient level in third grade, but they're really one grade level above or one grade level below? So I think and trying to get some better definitions or better understandable definition when it comes to proficiency would be something else we would ask them to. So to answer your question, there's a lot of things that we'd have to put out in RFP, and those are the type of things that we want. So make sure that you list those as part of what we do. I'm sorry.
I think she had the. Somebody's right here. We'll get you next.
Yeah, you
Okay, as a science person, my big concern is with the current system, our federal mandate is banded accountability, right? Fourth grade, seventh grade, once in high school. History tells us that's where we teach it. How are we going to ensure that we're not setting our kids up for a tremendous amount of trauma at that fifth grade level or sixth grade level, actually fourth grade, and then set again to sixth grade, when they're not being prepared for a curriculum where the standards spiral all the way through?
Well, one of the things that we're looking at as far as that science is also offering assessments 3 through 10. Now, of course, we're still looking at op 10 on those off years, if you will. So as part of what we would report is still those grade level bands.
Yes, and we were in the current framework, it is at 5, 8, and 11. Or 5, 8, and 10.
And in this framework, it's 5, 8, and 10. But right now,
we generate the same issue that we have now.
Yes. So what we're doing is, taking out that science and working on that. But we would say that we're still going to report those at those grade levels, but have assessments available for grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 for districts to opt to if they want to. It's an opt-in on those parts. They have to take the grade band levels so that we still report. So to, I think we're seeing less and less of that where districts are getting away from only testing in the fourth grade. And honestly, that has happened. And I feel better about where we are with our districts as far as teaching science of the non-accountability grades. I hate to put it that way, but we do need to have a continuous system all the way through.
Well, and that's one of the things that I like about the vibrant learning or the deeper learning. When you look at the framework for K-12 science education, that parallels that.
Yes.
It's that phenomenological experiential approach that we're seeing. And the research shows if you want higher reading or higher gains in reading and math, teach them in the context of science and social studies.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it seems like we're kind of getting that backwards because I'll keep hearing reading and math. Oh, and then we're going to do optional years for science and social studies, except for when they're required.
Well, see, that's one of the things that we've talked about with the vibrant learning with others. Now, we would require that vibrant learning for the districts to report social studies and writing. We haven't come down to say what grade levels or things of that nature, but also from the science level is encouraging districts, again, having that opt-in that, you know what, you may use our science assessment, but you may have a better competency-based system in science with the vibrant learning experiences that you want to put into your local accountability. Because there's a federal requirement, we still have to give the federal that science text. We still have to give that. So if as a district you develop these other measures, if you will, or these other assessments, you're welcome to do that. We're not requiring it at this point.
I think
for our it's for the people maybe watching. It's okay.
I'm kind of a nuts and bolts guy. My wife and I were teachers for 8 years, and we ran our own business for over 30 years now. And one of the things I'm hearing a lot about is what can be done about discipline within the classroom. Teachers spend more time dealing with the discipline of the kids that disrupt and keep the kids who want to learn from learning. And that's one of the things that I think needs to be addressed, because the teachers feel like their hands are tied and they really don't do. That's question number one. Question number two is how much more paperwork is this going to involve for the teachers? Because they're overburdened right now as it is with all the stuff they have to keep track of. And then question number three. Well, I'm sorry.
You're welcome for number three. Yes, okay.
How are you going to instill respect for authority within the classroom and within the school? Because if they don't have that now, and when they get out of school, they're not going to make it.
Let's step out the accountability part for just a second.
Okay.
And talk about some things that you brought it. Well, not under the microphone or the speaker. One of the things that we're really trying to focus on in the Office of Educational Licensure Effectiveness is how do we help districts develop those induction programs to help train teachers to better handle those situations. Now, we also fully understand with the help of the legislature when there's an issue to the point where a student needs to be removed, we understand that needs to happen. So when it comes to testing and accountability, what we're looking at is trying to provide opportunities for students that want to be in class and want to be there. So a lot of times if you provide these type of opportunities, hopefully, I think you'll see a correlation that hopefully discipline goes down.
Well, that's what you're trying to do with that deeper learning, I think will help a lot of those kids, because then we've got a young man that goes to our church, and he got into diesel mechanics, where he was a sophomore and actually went to the bus garage and was working on, and now he loves to go to school. Before, he didn't particularly care too much.
Well, and one of the things, the crime scene, I think, was at your alternative school, correct? I thought it was kind of ironic, crime scene alternative. Let's not be the system right now. But
we didn't take that.
We can't throw kids away. Nobody in the wants to throw them. So how do we get them hooked? How do we get them excited about what they're doing? And for some kids, that's a bigger hill to climb. As a former teacher, I always try to make things relevant for the student. I was a math teacher. I taught AP calculus. I taught algebra too. So it sometimes it's a stretch to say, how did this apply to your world? But once you connected it with the kid, and the kid may have had some type of hook where it brought them in, and whether it be a lab setting or other things, my attendance was good in class. My discipline was down. But we also know that there's always those cases where students that, how how do we use the court system, how to use other things. And that's right now that's out of our control. But that being said, any type of support that we can get to help in training at KDE, we will do that. But we have so many people across the neck that are trying to help districts with that. So it's my hope that these vibrant learning type of opportunities will help with that discipline issues that you see in class. So there should be a correlation connection. And I really appreciate the fact that you're looking at your alternative school and having that crime scene investigation where they're looking at different clues and saying, how is this, the science of this, how all of a sudden I want to do that. I want to do that. And I think that's very cool.
And my last question about how much extra paperwork is that?
Our goal is on the federal accountability side, our goal is to try to streamline that to the requirements. Now, that's why we're offering the opt-in portions, because we don't really want to offer, I don't want to burden our tests, got to get more tests. But if we think that would be beneficial to them, we want them to be able to opt in on those areas. So I will say that the local accountability part is a heavy lift with that work, but I think that teachers that have been involved in that have been so excited to see the change that they've taken that on. So they've kind of replaced that local accountability work, has taken the place of some of the other tedious type things that maybe they've done from day to day. We really rely a lot. What we're trying to do from the state level is streamline that federal part so that there's as less of an assessment, if you will, but also offer the opt-in if districts feel like that's important to them. The paperwork, we'll have to rely a lot on districts on how we work together to get that buy-in, but also to make sure that, again, we don't want to burden our teachers more than they already are. And to go back to that, the hardest part, I think, as a former teacher and working with so many people, our teachers take those burdens home with them. Our teachers oftentimes they see that child that may be hungry, that may be struggling, and they take that one child that home with them. How can we fix that? How can we help that child? That's a big enough burden. So if we can limit paperwork and other things too, and there's a red tape reduction act right now that's I'll be honest with you, I don't agree with all parts. I think it's got value. I think there's a lot of great things in it. Representative Tipton and I probably have some great conversations on that bill. I think you're sponsoring that bill. Is that correct, Representative?
One of the co-sponsors.
One of the co-sponsors. But there's some really, really good things in there. For example, teacher evaluation. If you've got teachers doing a great job, why would we have to evaluate them, summative evaluation every 3 years? Let's move that to 5. That takes away some of that burden with teachers. And so those are some things that now there's some parts of that we'll talk about the CSIP, the CDIP, that if those are removed, I think that would create an additional burden because there's certain federal requirements that districts have to create other areas in order to take care of those federal requirements without using the CSIP process. But I do respect and admire the work that our legislators are doing on trying to limit and take away some of that work from our teachers and our administrators. Oh, back here.
Hello. I value all the discussions happening around vibrant learning this evening, but what I've noticed is vibrant learning in my experience happens regularly, almost daily in the arts classroom, but there's been no mention of anything about the arts classrooms. I also spent the past 2 years working with Jessica Green at KDE to revise those art standards because there's no accountability for those revised art standards. So what kind of plans do you have to make some kind of accountability system for those and also recognize those student achievements in those areas?
It goes back to local accountability. How does the local district want to do that? I don't want to give a test on that. I don't think that's fair to the student because it really takes away the creativity when it comes to an art class. If you just give an assessment of some sort, we want to give districts the flexibility and, okay, this is what's value in our community. How do we do, how many art shows? I've been to several art shows within my former district that was just a beautiful opportunity for kids to showcase their talent. Country Music Highway went right through Lawrence County and having that music. And if you guys know Noah Thompson, I did give him his diploma, by the way. He won the American Idol. But we won. Shameless plug. Sorry. Shameless plug. But we want to leave that up to local districts on how do you want to showcase that, as opposed to saying the state is going to come up with an accountability system measures. We want that to say, okay, some districts may have such a larger focus on music and art And that'd be a big part of the local accountability system, but then we're leaving that up to local districts, right? But also too, we still have the supports at KDE to try to help build those local accountability systems that focus in on art, music, and others too.
Commissioner.
Yes.
I know it was briefly on the screen as well, but something that the Kentucky Board of Education actually insisted was added to the state portrait, creative contributor. And so a way to model for districts, how do you encompass creativity through the arts? And by helping incentivize really that partnership of your arts teachers to really come into those core subject areas to create those vibrant learning experiences together. So really into a more holistic approach to their education in general. So you see that mentioned very briefly in our Portrait of a Learner, but I think you would also see that in several districts as well, that they've tied creativity somehow to then hold themselves accountable to that element within their portrait. Just as one.
Thank you.
Hey. Of Kentucky Council for Social Studies. And so my colleagues in the next few weeks. But going back to the local assessment piece, I hear the local control, I hear the local reporting, I hear the ties to state requirement that social studies is not going away, it's still required to be reported. Will there be some kind of framework or rubric, or for lack of a better term, a floor that KDE could do for social studies, perhaps arts, perhaps science, to where we're often, because we're not math and reading. And, you know, I work with elementary schools where maybe social studies gets 20 minutes on Friday after recess, but before the bus is left. I mean, it's the laws of time and space, right? So how can we make sure with local control somehow that we're not compromising quality of instruction and we're not compromising the mastery of the standards?
One of the things that we've talked about is, you know, that flexibility of the local community. Like we've talked about, do we want to say, in order for you to have a local accountability model, it has to include this, and this. But where does that check mark end? Where does that end as far as those parameters? Because we want to give as much flexibility as possible in that local community. But I really hadn't thought about a floor for what's offered. That's a thought that we can put that in the comments. So that's something we can consider. And be as detailed as possible, because I don't always think in terms of floor. I think in terms of what is possible. So, you know, in order to have a true vibrant learning experience in social studies, you're going to have students engaged in the local community. And what does the build process look like? What those are things where they can write their own. I love KYA and Kuna. I think those are excellent opportunities that are very vibrant learning experiences. So I don't always always think of it in terms of how far can we go with it. So
I'm of the same school of thought. I'm very idealistic. We're doing amazing things in our district. Yeah. We're doing great things. But in terms of statewide equitable, you get to more rural areas where they might not have a larger community or a larger pool of resources. So, I mean, floor, I get the negative connotation because, yes, we all want to go for the good.
And I'll tell you one of the things I really struggle with. I really struggle with, and going back to the same thing, you know, in years past, and there's probably some of this across the state. I can't guess why I haven't witnessed it, but I've been in places where I've taught where, you know what, we're going to teach fourth grade science only because we got to focus on reading and math in third and fifth grade. Whereas, you know, I've seen districts that actually go back and part of their learning of reading and mathematics is implementing science and social studies and art into their, instead of just fantasy stories. This is more about, you know, implementing that content into the reading and mathematics also too. Now, I don't think that's as far as accountability, but I don't want to, as a former superintendent, we got away from that. You only teach certain content at certain times, but we want to be able to grow that in a way of, you know, do we need to be the people that say this is the minimum? Maybe we do. That's why we're here to listen.
I think
maybe we do.
I think
okay. Maybe we do.
Hey, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
I'll just mention, as a member of the with our council, we have some design principles that we've been using to guide those quality assurances as we make this work move forward. So it's something that you can look for that will help maybe appease some of those kinds of questions, because we want to make sure there's guardrails to ensure quality.
Yes, absolutely. And are there any members, how many members of our State United Learning Councils in the room? Would you stand up, please? You stand up, please. And again, I want to take the opportunity to thank, and the discussions that we're having here, I promise you have been mentioned in a lot of these too. So how do we get to that point to make sure that we ensure a vibrant, make sure that social studies, make sure it's science, make sure not only that's taught, but they have those experiences that are tied back to that content. Yes.
Hi, Commissioner.
Hello, Ms. Christian.
I didn't like that. A couple of things that I want to really expand a little bit more on local accountability, not just with the arts or with social studies. And we've had this conversation, right? In terms of when we talk about local assessment, local accountability, at what level? Hi, Mr. Reporter. I'm sorry, that was wrong. When we talk about guardrails and we talk about local autonomy, what do we do? Because when we hear about those external evaluators, which I've mentioned before, where does that list come from? Are they valid? Are they reliable? Right? And what is KDE's role? Because I'm always concerned that those guardrails may not hold. I'm always concerned that there's going to be an equity issue if we don't have someone watching. Right? It's not a big brother issue, but you've got to have guardrails. You have to have something in place. So can you talk about what we talked about before in terms of what those external evaluators will look like, who determines at the KDE level what that happens? And I want to, the gentleman who asked about how do we create or ensure respect in the classroom, as a parent, my argument is that starts at home. So when you bring in local accountability, you bring in family, community, family engagement. And if you do that, you don't have to have that problem in the building.
And that's one of the things that we've asked for is engagement. Senator Douglas to my left, one of his big speaking points is family engagement. How do we engage our family? And thank you, Ms. Christian, for that too. As we go through, I think that the more and more we engage families, the better the local accountability system will be, and also reduce hopefully will reduce our discipline issues as we work in the classroom, because we're working together as parents. Now, to go back to those guardrails, those are things that we're still have open for discussion. That's what we're here to listen. I don't have all the answers for that, but we have had some discussions, for example, an evaluator to come in and say, we're not here to say that at this point in 2.0, it's not about whether or not your local accountability system is valid or it gets checked off. It's more about identifying exemplar practices so we can put that on a district website, so we can share that, our statewide website, so we can share them. So if there's our exemplar practices when it comes to collaboration with communities or collaboration with families, we want to put those practices out there. Are there districts that have excellent profile of learners, that how they're incorporating that with their local community defenses of learning? We want to put those exemplars out there. So right now, the way we're defining the role of that external evaluator is to come in and identify exemplars so that you have those resources to go to say, this is what we believe is an exemplar when it comes to different type of practices that you have as it relates to
Hello, my name is Amanda Underwood, and I'm a social studies teacher. I'm 8th grade KYA advisor, CUNA advisor, involved in all of these vibrant learning experiences. And I hate to beat a dead horse. However, in a world of high stakes testing and accountability, what does it look like when there's local accountability for social studies in terms of TSI, ATSI, CS? Is there a component, is there a calculation that will include social studies in that calculation, so that there is accountability on every district to make sure that their students are becoming civically minded and future leaders, instead of just what it looks like on the page that everyone gets. I guess my concern is in a school of 700, I take 50 KY and Kuna, and those are vibrant. Oh, they are amazing experiences. But I need to make sure that the other 650 students in our school are prepared to be knowledgeable, educated citizens who are willing and able to participate in a world that we're preparing them for, that isn't just math and isn't just reading in government, and that they understand their rights. So I guess my overall question is there going to be, I mean, yes or no, is there going to be an accountability piece that says this part of your social studies education is going to go into the index that your district is graded on?
If you're looking at it as it is in 2.0 right now, no. So that's why we're here to listen to see what your input is. Now, that's one of the reasons that we were looking at local accountability taking part into this, requiring social studies and writing to be a part of local accountability. If you look at the federal guidelines do not require social studies or writing to be a part of that ATSI, TSI, or CSI designation. And so the percentage of the input that we've had so far is to streamline that portion as much as possible. High percentage, I don't have the percentage numbers, but the surveys we've done is to streamline that portion. But we also value, I think everyone in the room values our arts, our music, our social studies, our writing. So how do you incorporate that and require that into the local accountability system and leave that up to the districts? Is it part of a calculation for ATSI, TSI? No, not in 2.0, not at this point.
And I mean no disrespect. I love everything that's been presented. I'm just very passionate about.
And honestly, this is one of our struggles. This is one of our struggles because we're trying to balance the input that we're getting from so many people about trying to streamline the federal accountability, but also too, how do we show that we truly value social studies and writing? So what we've done is how do we, and there's probably going to have to be more guardrails of how that looks in a local accountability system. If we're really and truly going to have the federal accountability to be streamlined to the buckets that are required, then we're also going to have social studies and writing as part of local accountability. We may need to look at more guardrails of what that looks like, but also too, balance that with the desire of districts to have flexibility as much as possible too. So again, all this input, and believe me, we're listening. That's one of the main reasons that we've said we want local accountability to make sure that it has social studies and writing within it. Because the input that we've had from our surveys has been federal side, social studies, writing, and others are not required. And that goes back to that same question before. Can we change the mindset that it has to be assessed in an accountability system for our ranking before it can be important? Can we change that mindset? And I think we're relying heavily on districts to do that locally. So again, and believe me, I was a principal, and I'm going to admit something to this group, and I'm not very proud of this. I used to be a principal in a PLA school, and our plan was remediation, and we took kids out of art, took kids out of music. And if it wasn't testing social studies, sometimes we doubled up and tried to get more reading because we were a PLA school. And you know what? We played the game. And you know what? We met all the guidelines that we were supposed to meet. And then I got to be a superintendent. Same type of situation in this district. I love Lawrence County, call it home. But I was a principal in that district. I was actually superintendent in Lawrence County. Same type of situation. There was growth happening before I came. It was all about those interventions. It was all about, how can we make sure kids are getting the double time that they need to meet the remediation requirements. We put up banners when we met our goals and everything. We put up the ribbons. We put all that up. And I had a person come to me and say, "This is great, but are you relevant?" I was mad. I wanted to fire the person. We met goals. We met goals that we've never met as a district. We need to celebrate this. 2 weeks later, I had a kid to come in and say, Dr. Fletcher, I'm going to drop out of your school because you're not relevant for me. You don't offer what I need. And then that grew into making sure that we had more opportunities for socials, not just opportunities. We were teaching social studies. We want to make sure that's happening all grade levels. We wanted to make sure that our kids are having those career technical opportunities where they're getting dual credit. We wanted to make sure that kids, we weren't just focused on a test score anymore. We made sure we were doing what we needed to do, but we no longer took students. Those are just as important, and in some cases more. So as a superintendent, I'm ashamed to tell you, as a principal, I'm ashamed to tell you, I was one of those that did all of this. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be commissioner now, is to change the accountability system so we don't do that. Let's make sure the kids have that option of what's relevant to them.
Commissioner, you have time for maybe one more answer to one more question, as well as a closeout. But I do want to, for those that did write down a question, please don't walk out with it. Please leave that with us. You will receive feedback for your question. All right, so there is going to be a feedback loop as well offered at the end on the screen. But please, as after the commissioner closes, make sure that those questions stay with us.
Where did this model come from? I'm not an educator, never have been, but both my parents were. But where did this model come from? And it was at another state. And if so, do you have any measure of results from anywhere?
Actually, it has come from the work that has been happening in the right now. The District of Innovation that Sarah leads has been tremendously involved. The work out of the deeper learning grants that have happened, OVAC, it is a Kentucky initiative that is taking place, and the motivation is there because students are being impacted every day. We've got good things happening locally, and we want to spread those to all of our districts. And we see the outcomes for our students that they're thriving in these districts and having these deeper learning experiences.
So this is more of a groundswell. We've seen this type of work in so many of our districts, and the difference that it's made in the culture in their district. And seeing that work and seeing that effort and seeing the passion that our educators have for this, then that in turn gives the passion to our kids. So the more this has been going on since 2021. Yes. So this is not just something that was thought up over the past year. This is work that's been happening in our district since 2021. And again, trying to grow this throughout the Commonwealth as we move forward. So I don't think you'll find another model that matches this. I don't think. But now I will say this, Kentucky has been invited to be a part of a reimagining high schools. There's been 6 states been asked to do that, and with NASB, the National Association of School Boards, and we're going to be taking part of that also too. And that leads into we've been asked to share where we are now with what districts are doing. So. Oh, okay, great. First and foremost, thank you for your passion. And that passion translates in not just about content. It's not about a test score. It's about our kids. We want our kids to be prepared for whatever is coming forward. And that's only going to happen when we have collaborators, communicators, lifelong learners. We want to make sure that we build those foundations in reading and mathematics and make sure that our students are truly prepared. But we also want to make sure that every single student has that opportunity to display their learning. If you look at the moonshot as we go through, we're getting to that point now in spring of 2025, which is now talking more and more to the General Assembly. We've had General Assembly members to be a part of this. Representative Tipton has been with us every step of the way. But as we come up to a 3.0 version, and again, we're all not going to agree. We're all not going to agree. But I can tell you this, if you really put the work in from that local level and get the input of your community, get the input of your students, it's going to be successful. I think we're our Commonwealth, we can get this right. I don't want you to have to worry about the commissioner and whoever the new commissioner comes in as we change accountability. Let's leave streamlined federal accountability. There may be some things we need to do with guardrails, but the local accountability is up to you. If you want to change it, it's up to you. If you need to adjust it, it's up to you. And after all, your communities change, your students change. What that accountability looks like needs to be adaptable. But I don't need to be the person that's local accountability for. Go back to that student that you thought about earlier, that you voiced their name, whether it be your child, your brother, your sister, your little brother or sister, whether it be a grandchild. Is this what you want them to grow up in? Is this the system that you want them to see? I hope it is. And again, truly, this is about elevating the student and elevating our communities with vibrant learning and collaboration across the Commonwealth and North Carolina. Thank you so much for being here. If you have, if you look on up on the screen, we do have a QR code to submit any, oh God, well. Let's look over here. We do have, if you want to submit some more questions, please. So please leave those cards with us. I'll be here for a little bit longer. If you'd like to talk with me, I'll be happy to do so.